Nothing happens in vain. The Buddhist wisdom that will make you reflect throughout history. Buddhism has offered profound insights into the nature of life, suffering, and meaning. One of its most intriguing teachings is the idea that nothing in existence happens in vain. Every joy, every pain, every fleeting moment, and every breath carries within it a lesson, a seed of transformation, or a reminder of the interconnected fabric of reality. This is not merely a comforting saying, but a philosophical compass pointing toward a deeper understanding of why we experience what we do. It challenges us to step away from the illusion of randomness and embrace the notion that life is a teacher, and that every event, whether we perceive it as fortunate or tragic, plays a role in shaping the unfolding of our path. To the Buddhist mind, accidents do not exist in the way we ordinarily conceive them. Even suffering becomes a messenger, a sculptor of character, and a mirror to our attachments. When we open ourselves to this teaching, we begin to perceive life with new eyes. What once felt like meaningless struggle now reveals itself as training for resilience, compassion, or wisdom. What once felt like coincidence now appears as synchronicity or karma in action. This perspective does not remove difficulty, but it gives it purpose. And with purpose, suffering is not wasted. It becomes fertile ground for awakening. In the chapters that follow, we will journey through 5 expansive reflections on this principle, each unraveling a different aspect of how nothing happens in vain can transform our outlook. The depth of Buddhist wisdom invites us not only to reflect intellectually, but also to embody the insight in daily living. The hidden architecture of cause and effect. When the Buddha first spoke of dependent origination, he illuminated one of the most revolutionary ideas in human thought, that everything arises dependent on conditions. Nothing exists in isolation, nothing emerges without a cause, and nothing vanishes without leaving an imprint. To say that nothing happens in vain is to acknowledge this hidden architecture of cause and effect that underlies the entire cosmos. Consider the rain that falls from the sky. It may seem like an ordinary event, yet its arrival is woven from countless conditions: the temperature of the air, the movement of winds, the evaporation of oceans, the position of the sun. Each droplet carries within it the story of the whole universe. Likewise, each event in our personal lives is the result of visible and invisible conditions converging. When we suffer, it is tempting to believe that life is punishing us arbitrarily. But from a Buddhist perspective, suffering itself is an effect of causes, and within that effect lies the potential for insight. A painful breakup, for example, may at first seem meaningless, a cruel disruption of happiness. But when examined through the lens of cause and effect, we may see how it reveals our patterns of attachment, our unmet expectations, or our illusions about permanence. The heartbreak then becomes a lesson in impermanence and self-awareness. It shows us that clinging leads to pain and invites us to cultivate detachment and compassion. Nothing in that heartbreak was wasted. It was a teacher disguised as loss. This principle also applies to joy. When we experience moments of bliss, gratitude, or connection, they are not random gifts falling from the sky, but the fruit of causes, our actions, our attitudes, or even karmic seeds planted long ago. To recognize this is to honor joy as a sacred consequence and to treat it with mindfulness rather than grasping. Every smile from a stranger, every opportunity offered, every coincidence that feels like fate is part of the intricate tapestry of dependent origination. Nothing is without roots, and nothing leaves without traces. The realization of this truth changes how we live. Instead of dismissing life's events as meaningless, we learn to ask, what is this moment teaching me? What conditions created it? How can I transform this cause and effect chain into wisdom rather than ignorance? Even in silence, even in suffering, there are seeds of awakening waiting to be recognized. The universe is not random. It is rhythmic, patterned, alive with lessons. Every event, from the smallest to the grandest, becomes meaningful when we understand that nothing happens in vain. And so, as you reflect on your own life, the victories and defeats, the sudden twists of fate, the long nights of uncertainty, ask yourself not why it happened to you, but what it may be revealing about you. The hidden architecture of cause and effect is always at work, weaving meaning through the fabric of existence. To see it is to take the first step toward liberation. If you feel that these insights are touching something deep within you, don't let them fade away. Stay with us on this journey, because in every topic we will uncover new layers of wisdom that can shift the way you see the world. And if you want to continue exploring these teachings with us, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your presence here helps us grow, and together we can keep reflecting on the wisdom that transforms lives. The lessons hidden within suffering. To truly understand the Buddhist teaching that nothing happens in vain, we must turn our attention to suffering, because it is within suffering that this principle is tested most severely. Joy, after all, is easy to appreciate. When life smiles at us, we rarely question its meaning. But when pain arrives, whether through illness, betrayal, loss, or loneliness, our instinct is to resist, to demand explanations, to believe that life has become cruel or meaningless. Yet the Buddha taught that suffering is not an error in the fabric of existence. It is an essential component of it, an inseparable truth woven into what he called the Four Noble Truths. Far from being pointless, suffering is the very doorway through which wisdom can be reached. If nothing happens in vain, then not even our darkest nights are wasted. They are fertile ground for awakening, provided we learn to see them as such. Consider for a moment the nature of human suffering. We suffer not only because of external circumstances, but also because of the way we relate to those circumstances. The loss of a job, for example, is painful because it threatens our security, our identity, and our sense of worth. But the raw fact of the job loss is not what sustains our suffering. It is the stories we weave around it, the fear of never recovering, the anger at those who let us go, the shame we feel in comparison to others. In this sense, suffering is both an event and a mirror. It reflects back to us the attachments, illusions, and cravings that lie beneath the surface. Without suffering, we would never see the depth of our clinging, nor would we be motivated to let go. Thus, suffering is not meaningless. It is a teacher dressed in uncomfortable clothing. Buddhism often speaks of dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life. At first glance, this might sound pessimistic, as if the tradition is insisting that life is nothing but misery. But this is a misunderstanding. What the Buddha pointed to is not that life is entirely suffering, but that suffering is unavoidable whenever we cling to things as permanent or expect them to fulfill us completely. Birth is followed by aging, health by illness, union by separation, joy by impermanence. We suffer because we wish it were otherwise. Yet the presence of suffering is not random. It exposes to us the law of impermanence, the reality of change, and the futility of holding on. Nothing in this realization is wasted. Every tear has the potential to wash away an illusion. One of the profound ways in which suffering carries meaning is by cultivating compassion. When we ourselves endure pain, we become capable of recognizing the pain of others more deeply. A person who has never tasted grief may sympathize with someone who is mourning, but a person who has walked through grief understands with a heart that resonates. The Buddhist path emphasizes this transformation. Suffering is not wasted when it opens the heart, rather than hardens it. In this sense, suffering becomes the soil in which compassion grows, and compassion, in turn, is the root of wisdom. To live with compassion is to acknowledge that all beings are interconnected and that none of us are exempt from the struggles of existence. Moreover, suffering serves as a call to awaken. When life is comfortable, we often fall into complacency, believing that things will remain stable. But suffering disrupts this illusion. It shakes us from the dream of permanence and forces us to confront the truth. Nothing lasts forever, and our clinging only deepens our pain. In the ashes of disappointment lies the possibility of awakening if we dare to look closely. The Buddha himself did not come to enlightenment through indulgence or comfort. It was through his confrontation with sickness, old age, and death that he set out on the path of liberation. His story is a reminder that the raw encounters with suffering are never in vain. They are the very catalysts that propel us toward the search for truth. Some might argue that there are forms of suffering so senseless, so brutal, that no teaching can redeem them. The death of a child, the devastation of war, the cruelty of injustice. How could such events not be in vain? Buddhism does not deny the enormity of such suffering, nor does it trivialize it with easy answers. Instead, it offers a perspective. Even in the most incomprehensible pain, there is the possibility of transformation, if not of the event itself, then of our relationship to it. The suffering may not be chosen, and it may not be just, but our response can either perpetuate hatred and despair or open a door to understanding and compassion. This does not erase the tragedy, but it prevents the tragedy from being entirely meaningless. The seed of awakening can sprout even in the soil of devastation. The idea that nothing happens in vain also reframes our personal struggles in the light of karma. Karma is often misunderstood as some cosmic bookkeeping system of reward and punishment. In truth, it is simply the law of cause and effect applied to moral and mental actions. Our choices plant seeds, and those seeds bear fruit, sometimes immediately, sometimes far into the future. When we suffer, it may be the ripening of karmic seeds from past actions, but more importantly, it is an opportunity to plant new seeds through our present response. To meet suffering with anger is to sow anger. To meet suffering with patience is to sow patience. In this way, suffering is not wasted because it becomes a field for karmic cultivation. Every pain endured is a chance to respond differently, to break cycles of ignorance, to create conditions for future liberation. Another layer of meaning within suffering lies in the way it humbles us. Pride and ego thrive when life is easy, when we believe ourselves invincible. Suffering strips away that illusion, reminding us of our vulnerability and impermanence. This humility, though painful, is a profound gift. It allows us to connect with others honestly, to shed the armor of superiority, and to recognize that we are all travelers on the same uncertain road. Nothing in this humiliation is wasted. It softens the heart, levels the ground, and prepares us to walk the path of wisdom with sincerity. Suffering also deepens gratitude. When we recover from illness, we appreciate health in a way we never did before. When we emerge from loss, we value the presence of loved ones more profoundly. Without suffering, joy would be taken for granted. By contrast, suffering heightens our awareness of life's fragile beauty. Each sunrise, each smile, each moment of peace becomes precious because we know it is not guaranteed. Thus, even suffering that feels unbearable in the moment later reveals its hidden gift, the capacity to cherish what is fleeting. Buddhism does not suggest that we should seek suffering or romanticize it. The point is not to glorify pain, but to recognize that when it arises, as it inevitably does, it carries meaning. It is not a meaningless burden to be endured blindly, nor a punishment to resent, but a profound teacher to be listened to. Nothing in suffering is wasted if we allow it to teach us impermanence, compassion, humility, and gratitude. When we see suffering in this way, we begin to live with courage, because even our darkest experiences become part of the path rather than obstacles to it. Ultimately, to say that suffering is not in vain is to affirm that life itself is not in vain. The moments that hurt the most are not mere interruptions to our existence. They are part of its unfolding. They call us to awaken, to look deeper, to live with awareness. Every tear, every scar, every heartbreak can be woven into the tapestry of wisdom if we choose to see it that way. This perspective does not remove suffering, but it transforms it. It gives it purpose, and with purpose we find the strength to carry on, not with despair, but with clarity and compassion. As you reflect on your own experiences of suffering, ask yourself, what did this pain teach me? How did it shape my compassion, my humility, my gratitude? What seeds did it plant for my future self? If you look closely, you may find that even the moments you once wished had never happened contain within them the very lessons that shaped who you are. Nothing was wasted and nothing was in vain. If this reflection is resonating with you, if you feel that the struggles you have endured might carry meaning you had not seen before, then continue with us on this journey. Each step uncovers new layers of Buddhist wisdom, new ways to interpret the life you are living right now. And to keep walking this path together, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support allows these teachings to keep flowing, and together we can explore the wisdom that makes even suffering a source of awakening. The interconnected web of all beings and events. To grasp the fullness of the Buddhist teaching that nothing happens in vain, we must look not only at individual experiences, but at the vast network of connections that tie all beings and events together. Buddhism often speaks of interbeing, a term popularized in modern times by Thich Nhat Hanh, but deeply rooted in ancient wisdom. This truth reveals that nothing exists on its own. Every breath we take is made possible by the trees that produce oxygen, by the rains that nourish those trees, by the clouds that carried the rains, by the oceans that fed the clouds. Every bite of food we consume carries within it the soil, the sun, the labor of farmers, the transportation systems that delivered it to us, and countless other factors. To say nothing happens in vain is to see that nothing is ever isolated. Nothing is ever wasted because everything is bound within an intricate web of cause, effect, and interdependence. Think of a single sheet of paper. At first glance, it is just an object, thin, white, ready for writing. But look deeper, and you see the forest from which it came, the rain that allowed the trees to grow, the logger who cut the wood, the factory that processed it, the truck that delivered it, the store that sold it. Look even further, and you see the parents of the logger, the education of the factory worker, the oil that powered the truck, the miners who extracted that oil, the geological processes that created fossil fuels over millions of years. In that sheet of paper, the entire cosmos is present. It is not in vain that the tree grew, that the rain fell, that the sun shone. All of it converged to give birth to the paper in your hand. Likewise, every event in your life is the fruit of innumerable conditions. It could not have happened otherwise, and it connects you to the entire universe. This perspective radically changes how we see our lives. The loneliness you felt as a child is linked to your capacity for empathy today. The act of kindness from a stranger decades ago may still echo in the way you treat people now. Nothing vanishes without leaving traces. Buddhism teaches that our thoughts, words, and deeds ripple outward endlessly, affecting beings we may never meet. A smile offered on a difficult day may prevent someone from giving up hope. A careless word may wound someone in ways we never intended. The interconnectedness of life ensures that everything we do matters. And if everything matters, then nothing is wasted. Nothing happens in vain. This interconnected vision also reveals why compassion is essential. When you harm another being, you harm yourself, for the web of life makes no distinction between you and them. When you help another, you help yourself, because their well-being is inseparable from yours. This is not just poetic language, but a practical truth. Imagine a community. If one person is sick, the whole community is affected. If one person is joyful, their joy spreads. In a similar way, the pain and joy of others are never fully separate from us. To live as if they are is to live in ignorance. To see the web clearly is to live wisely, recognizing that our existence is shared. When we say nothing happens in vain, we are also acknowledging the profound synchronicities of life. Sometimes a chance meeting alters the course of your destiny. Sometimes a failure closes one door only to guide you toward another path, more aligned with your true nature. From the perspective of interdependence, these are not mere coincidences, but manifestations of the web weaving itself. The people you meet, the opportunities you encounter, the obstacles you face, all are connected to countless unseen causes. The realization that nothing is random but interconnected infuses life with awe and humility. Take, for example, the concept of karmic relationships. Buddhism teaches that the people we encounter are not simply accidents. They are part of karmic bonds forged through past interactions, whether in this life or previous ones. When someone comes into your life bringing joy or pain, it is not in vain. It is the unfolding of karmic threads seeking resolution, healing, or continuation. Even the most difficult relationships carry lessons, and even the briefest encounters can plant seeds for the future. If you believe that someone entered your life without purpose, you may miss the lesson. But if you see them as part of the web, you realize that every interaction is an opportunity for growth, forgiveness, or transformation. The interconnectedness of life also reveals the illusion of separateness. We often think of ourselves as isolated individuals, with our own successes and failures, our own joys and sorrows. Yet Buddhism reminds us that the self itself is interdependent. You are not an isolated I, but a convergence of countless conditions. Your parents, your ancestors, your culture, your teachers, the environment that nurtured you, the food you ate, the ideas you absorbed. Without all of these, you would not be who you are. When you look at yourself honestly, you see not a solitary being, but a vast network of relationships embodied in a single form. To recognize this is to realize that nothing about you has happened in vain. Everything that has shaped you is part of this larger whole. This insight extends to time as well. Events that happened long ago continue to resonate in the present. The choices of past generations still affect us today, in the form of inherited traditions, cultural structures, or even environmental consequences. Likewise, our choices today will ripple forward, affecting those who come after us. In this sense, nothing is lost to time. Every action, however small, leaves an imprint on the web of life. The laugh you shared with a child may inspire that child decades later. The waste you leave behind may shape the environment centuries from now. This is why mindfulness matters, because in an interconnected world, nothing is meaningless. The recognition of interconnection also offers solace. When we lose someone we love, it may feel as if they are gone forever. But in the Buddhist view, their presence continues in different forms. Their actions live on in the lives they touched. Their influence continues in the habits and memories of those who knew them. Their physical body transforms into the elements of the earth. Death is not in vain. It is a transformation within the web. Just as a leaf falls from a tree but nourishes the soil that feeds future growth, so too do our loved ones continue to exist within the greater whole. When seen this way, grief itself is not wasted. It becomes a bridge to gratitude for the web of connections that never truly end. In practical life, seeing interconnection helps us live more responsibly. If nothing happens in vain, then our consumption, our words, our votes, our relationships all carry weight. A careless choice can perpetuate suffering far beyond what we see, and a mindful choice can create ripples of healing. To live with this awareness is to live ethically, not out of fear of punishment, but out of respect for the web we are part of. This is why Buddhism emphasizes mindfulness in every action. Eating, speaking, walking, working. Each act reverberates. Nothing is trivial. Nothing is in vain. Perhaps the most liberating aspect of this teaching is that it restores meaning to the smallest details of life. The morning breeze brushing against your face, the bird singing outside your window, the stranger who holds the door open, all of these moments are not random. They are manifestations of the web. If you treat them as meaningless, you miss their beauty. But if you recognize that nothing happens in vain, you begin to live in a state of gratitude and wonder. Each breath becomes a miracle, each encounter a revelation, each challenge an invitation to grow. To fully embody this wisdom is to shift from asking, "Why did this happen to me?" to asking, "What is this connected to? What is it teaching me? How does it fit into the larger whole?" This subtle shift transforms frustration into curiosity, despair into resilience, isolation into connection. Life becomes less about control and more about participation in the great dance of interbeing. As you reflect on the interconnected web of all beings and events, notice how your own life has been shaped by countless influences. The books you read, the friends you met, the challenges you faced, none of them were in vain. They were threads in the tapestry that is you, and you, in turn, are a thread in the tapestry of others. Your existence matters because it touches countless lives, many of which you will never even know. Nothing you have lived is wasted, and nothing you will live will be in vain, because it all contributes to the whole. If this teaching is opening your eyes to the depth of life's interconnectedness, I encourage you to keep exploring with us. There are more insights to uncover, more ways to apply this wisdom to your journey, and if you want to stay connected and keep walking this path together, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your presence here strengthens this community of seekers, and together we can continue reflecting on the truth that nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in vain. Impermanence and the silent wisdom of change. At the heart of Buddhism lies the profound teaching of impermanence, or anicca, the recognition that all things are in constant flux. Nothing remains unchanged, and because of this universal truth, nothing is ever truly lost without meaning. To say that nothing happens in vain is to see that even the fleeting, the crumbling, and the vanishing carry lessons that would be impossible without their very transience. We often resist change, clinging to what feels stable, yearning for permanence in a world that refuses to grant it. Yet impermanence itself is the silent teacher that reveals why our joys are precious, why our struggles transform us, and why every moment, no matter how painful or joyful, holds significance. It is only through change that growth is possible, only through endings that beginnings arise, and only through impermanence that awakening can occur. Think of the seasons of the year. Spring bursts with renewal, summer flourishes with fullness, autumn lets go with beauty, and winter rests in silence. Each season dissolves into the next, and none can be held in place. If you were to insist that summer never end, you would miss the gift of autumn's colors. If you tried to stop winter from arriving, you would deny spring the soil it needs to return. In the same way, the seasons of our lives unfold with impermanence as their rhythm. Childhood gives way to youth, youth to adulthood, adulthood to old age, and old age to death. None of these transitions is in vain, for each stage of life carries its lessons. The laughter of childhood teaches innocence and wonder. The struggles of youth teach resilience and identity. The burdens of adulthood teach responsibility and compassion, and the fragility of old age teaches humility and detachment. Without impermanence, these lessons would never arrive. Impermanence is often the source of our suffering because we cling to what we love and resist what we fear. We want happiness to last forever and pain to vanish immediately. But life does not obey such desires. Friends move away, bodies age, relationships shift, opportunities pass. When we fight impermanence, we suffer not only from the change itself, but from our refusal to accept it. Yet Buddhism teaches that the very fact of impermanence is what makes joy meaningful. Imagine if nothing ever changed, if every experience were frozen in time. Pleasure would grow stale, relationships would lose depth, and growth would cease. It is precisely because moments end that we cherish them, and precisely because people change that we learn to love them, not as possessions, but as beings on their own journeys. Nothing in this process is wasted. Every transformation is part of the unfolding. The recognition of impermanence also dismantles the illusion of a permanent self. We often think of ourselves as fixed identities, but Buddhism reveals that the self is in constant motion, composed of body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness, all of which change moment by moment. You are not the same person you were yesterday, and tomorrow you will not be the same as today. This is not a loss, but a liberation. It means you are never trapped forever in your mistakes, never chained eternally to your past. Each moment of impermanence is a chance to begin again. Every failure can be redefined as a step in transformation, every loss as preparation for renewal. Nothing is in vain, because impermanence guarantees that every ending is also a beginning. Consider grief. When we lose someone we love, impermanence feels cruel, yet even grief itself reveals the depth of our capacity to love. We grieve because we loved, and love itself was not in vain. Moreover, grief reshapes us, deepens our compassion, and teaches us to treasure those who remain. The impermanence of life makes each embrace more precious, each word more significant, each shared moment more sacred. Death, which we fear as the ultimate waste, is in fact the ultimate reminder that nothing is wasted. The body returns to the earth, nourishing new life, while the love and influence of the departed echo in the lives they touched. Death transforms, but it does not erase. Impermanence is not only about endings, it is also about renewal. The seed must die to become a tree. The night must fall to make way for dawn. The caterpillar must dissolve into a chrysalis to emerge as a butterfly. In each of these transformations, nothing is in vain. The old form gives itself up to make possible the new. Human life mirrors this cycle. The dreams that fail, the identities that dissolve, the relationships that shift, all of them create space for new growth. To see impermanence as loss is to miss its deeper truth. Impermanence is the engine of creativity, the fountain of possibility. Nothing you have lost was meaningless, because without that loss, something new could not have been born. This understanding changes how we live day to day. When you know that impermanence rules all things, you learn to let go of grudges more quickly, because even anger is passing. You learn to appreciate beauty more deeply, because you know it will not last. You learn to endure hardship with patience, because you know it too will fade. Impermanence is not an enemy but a teacher, showing us how to live with presence. Each moment is unrepeatable and therefore sacred. Nothing is wasted when you live fully in the present, because the present is all that truly exists. Impermanence also encourages humility. No matter how powerful, wealthy, or famous someone becomes, time eventually transforms them. Youth fades, empires fall, reputations dissolve. Recognizing this truth removes the arrogance of permanence and replaces it with gratitude. To live in awareness of impermanence is to bow to the reality that we are all subject to the same law, and that law ensures that nothing we do, no matter how small, is in vain. Even the briefest smile offered to a stranger participates in the impermanent flow of kindness, leaving ripples that endure long after the moment has passed. In relationships, impermanence reveals itself constantly. People change, feelings shift, circumstances evolve. We often suffer when we expect relationships to remain fixed, but the truth is that love itself is impermanent in form. This does not mean it is wasted. On the contrary, the impermanence of relationships teaches us to love without clinging, to appreciate without possession, to accompany others on their path without trying to hold them still. Even relationships that end are not in vain. They leave behind lessons, memories, growth, and sometimes the strength to open our hearts again. Every connection, no matter how brief, contributes to the tapestry of our becoming. Buddhism also teaches that impermanence is the gateway to liberation. If things were permanent, suffering would be permanent too. But because all things change, suffering can end. The habits that bind us can be broken. The ignorance that clouds us can be lifted. The attachments that imprison us can be released. Impermanence is the hope of transformation. It assures us that no matter how dark the present moment feels, it will not last forever. And within that change lies the possibility of awakening. Nothing in our struggles is wasted if they move us closer to freedom. To embrace impermanence is to live with a mind of acceptance and a heart of peace. It is to stop demanding that life conform to our wishes and to start flowing with its rhythms. This does not mean passivity, it means wisdom. It means knowing when to let go, when to adapt, when to appreciate. It means recognizing that every moment is both a farewell and a greeting, a closing and an opening. Life is a river, never still, never wasted. Each drop, each wave, each current has its place in the whole. As you reflect on impermanence, consider the changes in your own life, the phases you passed through, the people who came and went, the dreams that rose and fell. All of them were not in vain. They were the unfolding of impermanence, shaping you into who you are now. And who you are now is not the end, but another step in the river of change. Nothing you lost was meaningless, and nothing you will lose in the future will be wasted. Everything is part of the wisdom of impermanence, the silent teacher that whispers, cherish, release, and grow. If these reflections on impermanence are resonating with you, if you feel the truth that nothing in your life has been wasted, then continue with us as we dive even deeper into Buddhist wisdom. Every step brings new insights, new clarity, new strength. And if you wish to stay connected to these teachings and grow together in this journey, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to keep exploring the wisdom that reveals why nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in vain. Awakening to the meaning woven through every moment. If we have followed the Buddhist insight that nothing happens in vain through suffering, joy, interconnection, and impermanence, we now arrive at the deeper truth that underlies them all, awakening itself. For the purpose of life, according to the Dharma, is not to accumulate possessions or status, not to cling to fleeting pleasures or escape pain, but to awaken, to see reality as it truly is, to shed the illusions that bind us, and to discover freedom beyond craving and fear. Every event in life, no matter how small or great, carries within it the potential to point us toward this awakening. The trivial conversation, the painful loss, the sudden opportunity, the silent mourning, all of it contains a seed. Nothing is wasted because everything can be used as a stepping stone on the path. The challenge is not whether life presents us with meaning, but whether we are willing to look deeply enough to see it. The Buddha often compared life to a field. In such a field, every experience is like a seed, and our awareness is the soil in which it is planted. Some seeds are bitter, some sweet, some difficult to swallow, but all can nourish awakening if we cultivate them with mindfulness. A cruel remark from another person, for example, could grow into resentment if we water it with anger. Yet it could also grow into patience if we water it with compassion. The event itself is not wasted. It is our response that determines whether the seed bears fruit in ignorance or in wisdom. This truth is liberating because it means no experience is meaningless. Even the most painful ones can be transmuted into clarity if we meet them with awareness. Nothing in the field of life is in vain. Awakening begins when we stop running from the present moment. Most of the time, we live as though meaning lies somewhere else, in the future, when we achieve our goals, or in the past, where we believe the best days remain. But the Buddhist teaching insists that reality is only ever found now. When we truly rest in the present, we discover that every moment hums with significance. The sound of rain on the roof, the laughter of a child, even the quiet ache of longing, each is a door into awareness. To see this is to realize that nothing is ever wasted, for every instant is alive with potential. Life itself becomes the Dharma teacher, offering lessons without pause. Yet awakening does not always come in grand revelations. More often, it arrives in subtle shifts, small openings that accumulate over time. A gesture of kindness alters our outlook. A setback humbles us into honesty. A fleeting insight arises in meditation. These fragments may seem insignificant at first, but they weave together to form the fabric of awakening. Just as a tapestry is created thread by thread, so too is enlightenment approached moment by moment. To believe that only extraordinary events matter is to overlook the sacredness of the ordinary. Nothing happens in vain, because the ordinary is the very ground where awakening grows. One of the most beautiful aspects of this teaching is that it redeems the past. How often do we look back with regret, wishing certain events had not occurred, certain choices had been different, certain paths had not been taken? Yet Buddhism reminds us that even those experiences we wish away contributed to who we are today. The failures taught humility, the heartbreaks taught resilience, the losses taught gratitude, even mistakes planted seeds of awareness that might bloom years later. To say that nothing happens in vain is to release ourselves from the prison of regret. The past cannot be undone, but it can be reinterpreted as part of the path. Every stumble was a teacher in disguise. Every wrong turn a step toward greater understanding. The same truth applies to the future. Anxiety often arises from the fear that what lies ahead will be wasted, that our efforts will amount to nothing, our dreams will collapse, our sacrifices will be in vain. Yet if we understand the principle of awakening, we see that whatever comes will carry meaning, even if it is not the meaning we anticipated. A dream that fails teaches flexibility. A success that fades teaches humility. A challenge that persists teaches endurance. The future cannot be wasted because it is never empty. It is always full of opportunities for insight. When we live with this awareness, anxiety loosens its grip. The unknown is no longer a threat but an open field where awakening may take root in countless ways. Buddhism also teaches that awakening is not a distant goal, but a process available here and now. Every moment of mindfulness, every act of compassion, every breath taken with awareness is already a taste of liberation. To live as though awakening were far away is to overlook the truth that life itself is awakening us continuously. Each sorrow strips away illusion. Each joy reminds us of impermanence. Each encounter reveals interconnection. When we open ourselves to these lessons, we see that the path and the destination are not separate. Awakening is not something added to life. It is life understood in its depth. Nothing in our daily existence is in vain, because each instant is both path and realization. Awakening also transforms how we view others. When we recognize that nothing in their lives is wasted either, we develop patience and compassion. The person who lashes out in anger is not merely cruel. They are expressing their own suffering. The one who struggles with mistakes is not hopeless. They are on their own path of learning. When we see that nothing in their story is in vain, we stop judging so quickly and begin supporting more gently. In this way, awakening is not only personal, but communal. The wisdom that nothing happens in vain deepens our empathy and binds us together as fellow travelers on the journey of becoming. Another dimension of awakening is gratitude. To awaken is to realize that every moment is a gift, even those wrapped in pain. Gratitude arises not because life is perfect, but because life is meaningful. The smile of a stranger, the challenge that forces us to grow, the silence that reveals clarity, all of these moments become occasions for thankfulness. Gratitude itself is a form of awakening, a recognition that the web of existence is abundant with lessons and connections. When we live in gratitude, we no longer waste time yearning for what we do not have, because we see the richness of what is already here. Nothing is overlooked, nothing is dismissed, nothing is in vain. The ultimate awakening is liberation from the cycle of craving and suffering. Yet liberation does not mean escaping life. It means seeing life as it truly is. To awaken is to recognize impermanence, interdependence, and the potential for transformation in every experience. From this perspective, life is no longer divided into good and bad, fortunate and unfortunate, wasted and meaningful. All of it is part of the path, all of it is necessary, all of it points toward freedom. In this light, the phrase, "nothing happens in vain," becomes not just a consolation, but a profound affirmation of the Dharma itself. To live with this understanding is to approach every moment as an opportunity. When joy arises, we savor it with mindfulness. When pain arises, we learn from it with patience. When confusion arises, we explore it with curiosity. In each case, the moment is not wasted. Life becomes a vast field of practice where awakening is always possible. This does not mean life becomes easy, but it does mean life becomes meaningful. Even when we stumble, we do so on sacred ground. Even when we fall into lessons that can lift us higher. Nothing in this process is in vain, because awakening weaves meaning through it all. As you reflect on your own journey, notice how the events of your life have shaped your growth. The joys and sorrows, the triumphs and failures, the ordinary days and extraordinary moments, all of them have contributed to the person you are today. None of it was wasted. Each moment, whether you recognized it at the time or not, carried the potential to awaken you. That potential is still present now, in this very breath, in this very awareness. Awakening is not elsewhere. It is here, in the recognition that nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in vain. If these reflections on awakening and meaning have touched your heart, if you feel the truth that every moment of your life has mattered and continues to matter, then continue walking with us. There are always deeper layers of wisdom to uncover, and the journey never ends. And if you wish to keep exploring these teachings together, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support sustains this path of reflection, and together we can continue awakening to the profound truth that life is never wasted and nothing ever happens in vain.